Yeah, the way that I think about it is like you have the above the fold, the profile picture, the title, the background art. That's
Yeah.
what I like to think of as like the first impression. You're trying to get somebody to want to scroll down to then the about section, the featured section. That's where you have the ability to kind of showcase and share your story and what you want people to do. And then the experience section, in my opinion, is more about backing up that you are capable of achieving that,
Hmm.
right? So you don't want, I don't want to say that there's like a right or wrong way to do that. A lot of it's just potentially passing the sniff test, right? So if you're basically saying that, you're building a, you know, if you're helping people with e-commerce as a service or building a product in the e-commerce space, wouldn't you hope that you probably have relevant experience in the e-commerce industry?
Hmm.
That's what people are going to be looking for. So it's like, well, have they built Shopify stores? Like, have they built software before? Like, how did they get there? And I feel like you want to be able to explain that and showcase that and be proud of that because that is your part of your story. And then you could get creative with how you're laying that out. If you've had different roles at a particular company, or maybe you don't have a lot of experience, but you're breaking down more about the company information. So let's say you've been in business for a few years. Being able to kind of like highlight some of the roles or the transitions that your company
Hmm.
has taken that demonstrates like seriousness that you're not just getting started, right? Because you could say whatever you want in the story, but there's usually a difference when you've been in business for 6 months and 3 or 4 years of seriousness of projects. Of just iterations of the business. And so being able to kind of lay that out, again, I view it as just helping people frame um, what your background is. And so, yeah, I understand what you're saying, where it's like, well, look, if you're building a business, like for you, if you're trying to build a LinkedIn service-based business, talking about all the things that you've done 10 years ago that have nothing to do with that, are potentially not helpful. So maybe trying to go deeper in some of the experience and explaining some of the experience that you've participated in over the last few years and breaking that out a little bit more creatively about lessons learned, at least allow you the framing when you're networking with people to be like, okay, O'Shane has worked with a lot of different people across a lot of different industries, a lot of different systems that demonstrate subject matter authority. Now that makes people feel like you could deliver on what you're describing as your story. If you're projecting that you want to help people, grow on LinkedIn, grow in business, grow in AI, then the natural next step is, well, why you? And that's where your experience comes in. And it's okay if it's not robust, but at least be able to demonstrate what you do have somewhat creatively. That at least gives some thoughtful analysis over how far you've come in that process.
Hmm. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. All right, so that confirms it. Make it relevant. Your
Yeah.
experience section. Be thoughtful as to what you put out there, and don't let it clash with your personal brand. If you were a different person then, all right, and you're a different person now, and it doesn't add up, is if it's not cohesive, then it's probably not helping you. It's hurting you, right? But at the same time, you could use pieces and points from your experience back then to further strengthen the experience that you have now. To say, okay, this is where I started, and what I've learned has contributed to the value that I can provide now. Right? But of course, we have to be, I guess, intelligent as to how we communicate that. Right. So maybe you don't need to remove your experience from 10, 15, 20 years ago, but maybe you could go in and tweak it. Tweak it with what you know now. You can tweak it so it supports your latest point of experience. So your entire profile becomes a lot more cohesive.